Do you have what it takes to be a great engineer? Today I'm going to talk about what I think it takes to be a great engineer, and you might be surprised because you may have more of it than you think. What is it that makes a great engineer? So you may think that being a great engineer has everything to do with being great at math and science and all the other traditional nerdy things that people talk about engineers being into. But the reality is, an engineer is someone that has to work with the community and people. So I think an engineer needs to be able to put themselves in the place of the people that they need to represent, which is beyond just who you're working for necessarily, in the fact that a lot of the work we do is for the greater good of the community and of society. So you not only do the work for the people that are paying you, but you need to always keep in mind the greater good of everyone when you are a professional engineer working and doing public works type work. So with that said, I think empathy is extremely important in being able to put yourself in the positions of other people and understand what their concerns may be, what their problems may be, and produce solutions that help to solve the most problems for the greater good of everyone that is affected. So empathy is very important in being able to understand where your customers are coming from, where the contractor is coming from, and how they need to be able to work together with the engineer, the client, and the public. And being able to do that to put a team together to operate as a team instead of where in some cases the engineer and the client and the contractor don't always work together as a team and they tend to butt heads. I think good engineers tend to build a team together with everyone involved. And it's important that they be able to put themselves in those positions and understand where the others are coming from to help make that team a good, solid, cohesive team. Now with that said, along with empathy, a lot of the times you need to humble yourself, and a good engineer is able to be humble and step back and listen to what other people have to say, because if you don't step back and listen to what other people have to say, you'll never learn anything, and you'll never ever understand where other people may be coming from to help improve your ability to help other people. So you need to be able to be humble and understand that there's always something more to be learned. And the more you're willing to step back and listen to other people, the more you're likely to learn and grow, and the better engineer you will be. For example, some of the most insightful things that I have learned have been from contractors working on construction projects that don't have necessarily any formal engineering education, but they work in the field on these particular things day in and day out, and they see the problems that occur while working on these things and the ways not to build things. And if you can step back, ask questions, and listen, and humble yourself, and understand that maybe they don't have the education, but they do have a lot of great information, then you'll be able to gain that knowledge through asking questions and giving them a platform to speak to you on. So I've always stood by some of the most intelligent people I've ever met have actually been construction workers on construction projects, because they know how to connect the engineering to the real world in a real way that works. And they know the problems they need to avoid to make those things work. Now, in the interest of making things work, I think it's important that an engineer be creative and imaginative to implement those creative ideas that they may have into the projects and into the things that they may be doing. So in the sense of being creative, I mean you are usually limited by some specific set of limitations, but you need to get a specific thing done that may not be done normally with this set of tools or limitations, but there may be a way you can re-implement something that normally would be used for something else. For example, when I was in the field, we had a truckload of precast concrete slabs, but the contractor didn't have a forklift or anything to lift the slabs off of the truck and onto the ground. But I suggested to the contractor maybe they use their crane that's on the mechanic's truck to offload the concrete from the truck. And no one had considered that, and that was something that is available and it's something around, but you only ever use that for working on equipment and fixing equipment. No one ever considered using it for any other use beyond the normally intended use, and doing things like that where you have a limited arsenal of tools, but you can potentially implement those tools in a different way to accomplish your goals. Plus, thinking out of the box like that helps the contractors, and they really appreciate not having to bring more equipment in just to do one simple task. But creative solutions can also be implemented in the design process, even though we are usually pretty restricted with regulations, but creative solutions can be implemented to make things work the way that we intend it to work within the realm of the limitations we have. So on top of being creative, it helps to have a spatial ability to conceptualize something and visualize it in your mind and be able to kind of rotate it and understand it in a three-dimensional world, all in your imagination and your mind, to help solve problems. And now this isn't necessarily something that everyone just has inherently, but I think it's a skill that people can acquire. And so if you're really interested in being an engineer or interested in just understanding the world better, maybe when you see things, try to visualize them in your mind and then build the structure. Like, go look at your mailbox and then think about that mailbox and try to understand, okay, I can see my mailbox in my mind and rotate it and understand how these things are connected together. But start small with little things, even like a cube, for instance. Like, visualize, conceptualize a cube, and then you can build up from there. And eventually you can develop this skill of being able to look at something that's not entirely complete, but you can still put it together in your mind. I think this is probably the skill or trait that everyone can have, but you probably have to work the most to acquire this or to understand and conceptualize this. So I don't think it's required. For instance, I know an engineer that he can conceptualize things, but he still has to hold his fingers up to remember which way is left and right. So you don't necessarily have to have all this awareness to have this skill still to some extent. And finally, I think that if you're watching this video, you're probably to some extent curious about the world, and that curiosity is extremely important because it helps to constantly be looking around and wondering why or how or what, and then diving in and trying to understand that, or even just trying to conceptualize and do it in your own imagination, or to see how you would do something in the real world. If you're really interested in engineering, I think a really important starting point is to look at the things around you and see if you're interested and want to learn more about why something as simple as installing a fence post or installing a fence. It's pretty intriguing how someone builds a fence, and you wouldn't really think about all the things that go into getting a fence straight and level and how they make it look nice across uneven ground. And there's just a lot of things that go into it, more than you can usually imagine just by looking at it. And I think that curiosity of trying to understand things more and inquiring about those things, not just being curious in general, but actively trying to learn more, is probably one of the most important things, and one of the things that makes a good engineer. So in my experience, I think great engineers are empathetic, they have the ability to be humble, they're curious, imaginative, and creative, and inquisitive, and they also work on their spatial abilities and being more aware of their surroundings and being able to conceptualize their surroundings. But I think more than anything, the point is, I think anyone who wants to be an engineer and really has the desire to be an engineer can be an engineer. And if you have this desire and this want, I think some of these things will come with time. But I think some of these things are important to keep in mind, and if you think that there are other things that I may have missed that make great engineers, leave it down below in the comments, and thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.